The first time my father called me a failure in front of the entire board, I still believed he loved me. The second time, I stopped defending myself. The third time, he signed the document that erased my place in the family, and I realized there was nothing left for me to save. Your brother built this company, my father said coldly. You merely inherited opportunities you were never capable of using. I stood at the end of the conference table, staring at the papers in front of me. My older brother, Adrian, leaned back his chair with a faint smile. My mother wouldn't look at me. My younger sister, Clara, kept her eyes on her phone. And my father continued, "We're removing you from the executive development program. Effective immediately." I looked down at the document. It wasn't just a demotion. It was a declaration. My father had transferred the project I had spent 3 years developing to Adrian. The project I had designed. The software architecture I had built. The clients I had personally convinced to trust us. All of it now carried my brother's name. I slowly lifted my eyes. Did Adrian even read the proposal? My father frowned. What does that have to do with anything? Nothing, I said. That answer surprised him. Usually, I would have explained everything. I would have shown emails, contracts, design drafts, meeting records. I would have reminded him of every night I had stayed at the office while Adrian attended parties. But that morning, something inside me had become strangely quiet. My father pushed the document toward me. Sign. I picked up the pen. Adrian watched carefully. He expected a fight. Instead, I signed. My father blinked. You're not going to argue? I put the pen down. No. Adrian laughed softly. Finally learned your place? I looked at him. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to answer. I simply walked out. 3 days later, my family celebrated Adrian's promotion. They posted photographs online. My father stood proudly beside him. The caption read, "The next generation of our family business." My name wasn't mentioned once. I stared at that photograph from my apartment. Then I closed the screen. That should have been the end. It wasn't, because my family had no idea that I had already started preparing to disappear. Not dramatically, not with a suitcase thrown into the street, not with threats or revenge. I simply began removing myself from the life they had already decided I didn't belong in. And the strangest part was that nobody noticed. For years, I had been the quiet son, the one who fixed problems nobody knew existed. When Adrian missed a deadline, I repaired it. When Clara needed money for school, I found a way to help. When my father nearly lost our biggest client 5 years earlier, I stayed awake for 19 nights rebuilding the company's entire logistics system. Nobody knew, because I never told them. I thought family didn't need receipts. I thought love meant helping without asking to be recognized. That belief had cost me more than money. It had cost me my identity. I remember being 12 years old, standing beside my father in the company's first warehouse. He had placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "One day, this will all belong to you boys." I had looked at the endless rows of machines and smiled. I believed him. Years later, I realized he hadn't meant both of us. He had meant Adrian. I was simply too young to understand the difference. My phone rang. It was my mother. I answered. "Where are you?" "At home. Your father wants you at dinner tonight." I almost laughed. "Why?" "He says we need to discuss your attitude." "My attitude?" "You embarrassed him by signing without arguing." I stared at the window. That sentence told me everything. They weren't angry because I had lost my position. They were angry because I had stopped fighting for their approval. "I won't be there," I said. Silence. Then my mother's voice softened. "Don't make this worse." I closed my eyes. "Mom, I don't think I'm the one making it worse." She sighed. "You've always been sensitive." That word hurt more than I expected. Sensitive. It was the word they used whenever I noticed something they didn't want to discuss. I swallowed. "Goodbye, Mom." I ended the call. That evening, I packed one suitcase. Not because I was running away, because I was finally leaving a place where I had spent my entire life trying to earn permission to exist. Before I left, I walked through the family house one last time. My childhood room was almost untouched. On the shelf sat a small wooden model of a bridge. I had built it when I was 14. My father had once looked at it and said, "You think too much." I smiled bitterly. Maybe I did. Maybe that had always been my problem. I didn't think too much. I simply thought beyond what they could see. I took the wooden bridge with me. Nothing else. At 6 the next morning, I left. No goodbye. No announcement. No dramatic message. Just a locked apartment, a canceled family credit card, and a train ticket to a city where nobody knew my surname. I thought someone would call. My father did not. My mother did not. Adrian certainly did not. For 3 weeks, nobody came looking. Then on the 22nd day, I received a message from my sister. Dad says you're being childish. Come home when you're done pretending. I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. That was the first decision I made entirely for myself. And it changed everything. The city I moved to had no reason to care who my father was. That was exactly what I needed. I rented a tiny room above an old printing shop. The ceiling leaked when it rained. The elevator worked only when it felt like cooperating. My bed was so narrow that turning over at night felt like a negotiation. But nobody there knew my family. Nobody cared that I had been removed from company board. Nobody expected me to prove that I deserved my own surname. For the first time, I was simply a man trying to build something. I found work at a small technology consultancy called Northline Systems. The owner, Mara Bennett, interviewed me herself. She was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed and direct. She looked through my resume. Then she looked at me. You have impressive experience. I've had good opportunities. That's not what I asked. I stayed quiet. She tapped the resume. These projects are unusually advanced for someone your age. I worked hard. She smiled. Everyone says that. I thought the interview was over. Instead, she closed the folder. What do you actually want to build? The question caught me off guard. Nobody in my family had asked me that in years. They always asked what I could do for them, not what I wanted. I looked at her. I want to build systems that help small companies operate like large ones. Why? Because I've watched good businesses fail because they couldn't afford the technology that wealthy companies take for granted. Mara studied me. Then she said, start Monday. My salary was modest. My responsibilities were not. I worked during the day and stayed late at night. But this time, I wasn't working to save my family's company. I was working towards something that belonged to me. 6 months passed. I developed a new logistics platform for a regional manufacturing client. It reduced their delivery delays by 38%. Mara stared at the final report. You built this? With a team. You designed the core architecture. I shrugged. She leaned back. You really don't like taking credit, do you? I smiled. I used to think credit was dangerous. Why? Because once people know what you can do, they start expecting more. She laughed. That's the strangest answer I've heard all year. But she remembered it. So did I. One night, while we were reviewing another project, Mara placed a file in front of me. You should start your own company. I almost laughed. I don't have money. You have something more valuable. What? She pointed to my notes. A system nobody else is thinking about. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened my laptop. For years, I had kept a private folder of ideas. Not family projects. Not company property. My own ideas. One concept had been sitting there for nearly 7 years. A platform that allowed small manufacturers, suppliers, and retailers to share inventory data in real time without needing expensive enterprise software. I had once shown the concept to my father. He had barely looked at it. Too small, he had said. I had believed him. Now I wasn't so sure. I spent the next year developing it. There were failures. Investors rejected me. One called the idea a solution looking for a problem. Another told me, your market is too small to matter. I almost gav it up. Then a small furniture manufacturer agreed to test it. Their inventory losses dropped dramatically within 3 months. Another company joined. Then another. Soon, the companies weren't asking whether the platform worked. They were asking when they could get access. Mara became my first investor. Not because she was family, because she believed in the work. We named the company Meridian Grid. I kept my surname off the branding. I wanted the product to stand on its own. 2 years after I left home, Meridian Grid had 43 employees. Then 70. Then 120. We expanded into 3 countries. But I still lived simply. I didn't buy a mansion. I didn't purchase expensive cars. I didn't announce anything to my family. They had chosen not to know me. I decided to respect their decision. Meanwhile, back home, my family business began changing. At first, I heard nothing. Then an old colleague called. You don't know? Know what? Your brother's struggling. I leaned back. With what? The logistics division. My stomach tightened. That division had once been my responsibility. What happened? He replaced most of the systems you built. I closed my eyes. Of course he had. Why? He said your methods were outdated. I didn't respond. The colleague continued. And now they're having inventory problems. I looked at the Meridian Grid dashboard, glowing on my screen. For a strange moment, I felt something close to sadness. Not satisfaction, sadness. Because I remembered how badly I had wanted my father to say, "You did well." Instead, he had said, "Your brother can do better." I thanked my former colleague and ended the call. That night, Mara came into my office. "You look troubled. My family business is failing." She paused. "Do you want to help them?" I looked at the city lights outside. Once, I would have said yes immediately. Now I wasn't sure. "I don't know." Mara nodded. "Then don't decide from guilt." Her words stayed with me. 3 days later, an unexpected email arrived. It was from a multinational retailer interested in acquiring Meridian Grid. The offer was enormous. But buried in the final paragraph was something I hadn't expected. They wanted me to attend a private industry summit. And one of the companies listed among the summit's major sponsors was my family's company. For the first time since disappearing, my two worlds were about to collide. And I had no idea that when they finally saw my name, they would discover that the son they had called a failure had become the one person their future might depend on. The invitation arrived on a Monday morning. I read it twice before I understood what it meant. The Global Supply Innovation Summit wasn't just another industry conference. It was where major manufacturers, logistics companies, investors, and technology firms met to negotiate partnerships worth millions. Meridian Grid had been invited as a featured technology company, and my family's company, Veilcrest Industries, was one of the event's oldest sponsors. For years, I had imagined what it would feel like to see my family again. Sometimes I imagined anger. Sometimes I imagined satisfaction. But when the moment actually arrived, I felt almost nothing. Mara noticed. "You're unusually quiet." "I'll be seeing my family." She stopped walking. "Are you sure you want to go?" "Yes." "Why?" I thought about it. "Because I don't want to spend the rest of my life avoiding rooms just because they might be in them." She smiled. "That's a better reason." The summit began 3 weeks later. I arrived early. Nobody recognized me. That was almost funny. I wore a simple dark suit, carried no family insignia, and introduced myself only as the founder and CEO of Meridian Grid. People shook my hand. They asked about our platform. They wanted demonstrations. Investors gathered around our booth. I answered questions calmly. For the first time, my success didn't feel like something I needed to prove. Then I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Adrian, the investors from Singapore are waiting." My body went still. I turned. My brother was standing less than 20 feet away. He looked different, more expensive, more tired. His suit probably cost more than my first year's salary at Northline, but his eyes were the same. He was laughing with two executives when he noticed me. His smile disappeared. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then he walked toward me. "You." I nodded. "Hello, Adrian." He stared at me as though I had appeared from nowhere. "You're here?" "Yes." "What are you doing here?" I gestured toward the Meridian Grid booth. "Working." He looked at the company logo, then at me. "Meridian Grid?" "Yes." He laughed once. Not because it was funny, because he didn't know what else to do. "You started this?" "Yes." He looked around. People were watching us now. His expression changed. "You should have told us." I almost smiled. "You told me I wasn't part of the company anymore. That doesn't mean you disappear." It did. He stepped closer. "Dad will want to see you." "I don't think he does." "You don't know that." "I know he never called." Adrian's jaw tightened. Before he could respond, a woman approached us. She was the chief strategy officer of one of the largest retailers in the region. "Mr. Hale, we're ready for the private demonstration." Adrian looked at her, then back at me. She smiled at me. "Are you the founder?" "Yes." Her expression brightened. "We've been trying to meet you for months." Adrian's face changed completely. He suddenly understood. The company everyone had been talking about wasn't some small startup. It was mine. The same company his executives had been studying for weeks. The same technology that had started appearing in industry reports. The same name his father had recently dismissed as another overhyped startup. Adrian looked at me. You never told us. I answered quietly. You never asked. Then I walked away. The demonstration lasted 40 minutes. When it ended, 3 companies requested partnership meetings. One investor offered funding. Another offered international expansion. I should have been excited. Instead, I found myself remembering my father's conference room. Your brother built this company. The sentence no longer hurt. That surprised me. After the meeting, my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen. I hadn't spoken to her in 2 years. I almost ignored it. Then I answered. Hello. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then her voice came quietly. Is it really you? Yes. I saw the broadcast. What broadcast? The summit. I leaned against the wall. Oh, you're the founder of Meridian Grid. Yes. She breathed out slowly. Why didn't you tell us? I closed my eyes. Because you never wanted to know. But I didn't say it. Instead, I asked, how is everyone? That question broke something in her. She began crying. We thought you were being stubborn. I stayed silent. We thought you'd come back after you calmed down. I wasn't angry, Mom. Then why did you leave? I looked through the glass doors at the crowded summit floor. Because I finally understood that staying wasn't the same as belonging. She didn't answer. Then she whispered, your father wants to see you. I almost laughed. Why now? He needs to talk to you. I knew what that meant. Now I miss you. Not I'm sorry. Not even how have you been. He needed something, and I was finally valuable enough for him to admit it. I'll think about it, I said. Please. The call ended. That evening, I received another message. This one was from my father. Come to the hotel. We need to discuss a possible partnership between Veilcrest and Meridian Grid. I stared at the message. Not son. Not how are you. Not come home. A partnership. I put the phone down. For years, I had dreamed of hearing my father ask me to come back. Now that he finally wanted me, I discovered I no longer wanted what he was offering. But I still went to the meeting. Not for him. For closure. My father was waiting in the hotel's private lounge. Adrian sat beside him. My mother was there too. Clara stood near the window. For one strange second, it looked like an ordinary family gathering. Then I remembered why I had left. My father stood. You look well. I'm doing well. He nodded. I've been following Meridian Grid. I assumed you had. He gestured toward the chair. Sit. I sat. Adrian placed a folder on the table. We've reviewed your platform. I looked at him, and he hesitated. It could solve several problems we're currently facing. There it was. The real reason. My father opened the folder. Veilcrest wants exclusive access. I almost smiled. Exclusive? For our regional operations. That isn't possible. His expression hardened. Why? Because Meridian Grid isn't a family asset. Adrian leaned forward. We're offering a very favorable contract. I believe you. Then what's the problem? You want control. Silence. My father looked annoyed. You always overcomplicate things. I looked at him. No. I learned to read the fine print. Adrian's face reddened. My father pushed another document toward me. We're prepared to offer you a position on the executive board. I stared at the paper. For years, those words would have meant everything. Now they felt strangely empty. What position? Chief Technology Officer. I laughed softly. My father frowned. What's funny? 2 years ago, you told me I wasn't capable of leading a division. That was different. Ow! You weren't ready. I looked at him. I wasn't ready because you never intended to let me be. My mother's eyes filled with tears. My father became quiet. I stood. I'll send your legal team a standard partnership proposal. Adrian stared at me. You're refusing the board position? Yes. You'd rather run a startup than return to your family? I paused. No. I looked directly at him. I'd rather run my life. Nobody spoke. I walked toward the door. Then my father said something that stopped me. You're still my son. I turned. For the first time, his voice sounded tired instead of authoritative. You could come home. I looked at him for a long moment. I already did once. His expression changed. I came home every time you called. Every time you needed me. Every time Adrian made a mistake. Every time Clara needed help. Every time the company was in trouble. I swallowed. But when I needed someone to believe in me, there was nobody. My father looked down. I didn't know. You didn't ask. That was all I said. I left. Outside the hotel, the night air felt strangely light. But the story didn't end there. Because Veilcrest's problems were worse than I had realized. Over the following months, the company lost 2 major contracts. Their inventory system continued failing. Their debt increased, and rumors began spreading that Adrian had falsified several internal performance reports to hide the damage. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I simply continued building Meridian Grid. Then Mara came into my office one evening carrying a thick file. "You need to see this." "What is it?" She placed it on my desk. Veilcrest's latest legal filings. I opened the file. My eye stopped on one paragraph. A subsidiary of Veilcrest had been accused of misrepresenting technology ownership during a financing round. The technology involved was partly based on an early system I had designed before leaving. My name wasn't on the patent, but my old development notes were. I remembered something. 7 years earlier, my father had asked me to sign a stack of documents after I completed the company's original logistics architecture. He had said they were routine intellectual property forms. I had trusted him. Now I realized what those documents had actually done. They had transferred ownership of my work. But there was something else. Mara turned another page. This is the important part. I read it. My original technical notebooks had been preserved in the company's archive, and several of the timestamps predated the patents Veilcrest later registered. If the company had claimed ownership of technology they didn't actually create, the legal consequences could be serious. I closed the file. I don't want revenge. I know. What happens if I ignore this? Potentially nothing to you. And if I cooperate with the investigation? She looked at me. You may finally recover ownership of work you created. I stared at the documents. For the first time, I understood that my disappearance had not erased my past. It had simply given me enough distance to see it clearly. Then my phone rang. It was my father. I answered. His voice was barely recognizable. "Please." One word. No authority. No anger. Just fear. "Please come home." I closed my eyes. "What happened?" He breathed shakily. "They found your old files." A pause. "And now they're asking questions about everything." I said nothing. Then he whispered, "I think we took from you what was yours." I didn't go home that night. I went to my office instead. The city was almost empty when I arrived. Most of the lights in the building had already been turned off, but my office was still glowing. Mara was waiting for me. "You heard him," she said. I nodded. He admitted it. That's not the same as admitting everything. I knew what she meant. My father had always been careful with words. He could make an apology sound like a negotiation. I opened the old files again. The documents were unmistakable. The original architecture had been mine. The development notes carried my handwriting. The earliest prototypes had my private code signatures embedded inside them. And the intellectual property transfer I'd signed at 22 had been presented to me as a routine employment document. I had never read it carefully. I had trusted my father. That was the part that hurt. Not the money. Not the patents. The trust. Mara sat across from me. "You don't have to fight this." "I know. You can walk away." I looked at the files. I spent my entire childhood believing that if I worked hard enough, my family would eventually see me. I paused. I'm not going to spend my adult life fighting them to make them see me. "So what will you do?" I closed the folder. Tell the truth. The next morning, I hired an independent legal team. I made one condition clear. I don't want Veilcrest destroyed. My attorney looked surprised. "Your claim could be substantial." "I know. Then why limit it?" "Because I want what belongs to me. Nothing more." The investigation began quietly. For several weeks, nobody outside the legal teams knew. Then the first report leaked. Veilcrest's original logistics technology was under review. Investors panicked. News outlets began asking questions. My father refused to comment. Adrian blamed former employees. That was when I realized he still hadn't changed. Even now, he was looking for someone else to carry the consequences. Then something unexpected happened. Clara called me. I almost didn't answer. She sounded different. Not angry. Not defensive. Just tired. "Can we talk?" "We're talking." "No. I mean properly." I waited. She whispered, "I was cruel to you." I didn't respond. I knew Dad favored Adrian. My jaw tightened. "I knew you were doing more work than anyone." "Then why did you say nothing?" Because I was afraid. Of what? Of becoming the next person he was disappointed in. That answer stayed with me. For years, I had thought my family had simply chosen Adrian over me. Now I understood something more complicated. They had built a system where everyone was afraid of losing my father's approval. Adrian had learned to survive by pleasing him. Clara had learned to disappear. My mother had learned to keep the peace. And I had learned to overwork myself. Nobody had won. We had simply become different versions of unhappy. I'm sorry, Clara said. I looked out the window. Thank you. Do you hate us? I thought carefully. No. She began crying. I think that's worse. Why? Because if you hated us, maybe you'd still want something from us. I closed my eyes. She understood. I don't want anything from you anymore, I said. The call ended. A month later, the investigation reached its first conclusion. The technology had indeed originated from my work. The ownership transfer had been improperly represented internally. Veilcrest had to renegotiate several agreements. I received a settlement, but I refused the amount their lawyers initially offered. Instead, I requested something much simpler. Full recognition of authorship. My name restored to the original technology records. And a public correction. My father fought it. Adrian fought harder. But eventually, they agreed. The announcement was published on a Friday morning. For the first time, my name appeared beside the technology that had helped build Veilcrest. Not as the son of the founder. Not as Adrian's younger brother. As its original creator. The reaction was immediate. Industry publications picked up the story. Investors started contacting Meridian Grid. One headline read, "The forgotten architect behind Veilcrest's most valuable technology." I stared at the screen. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. That afternoon, Mara entered my office. "You're trending." I noticed. "You should celebrate." "I think I'll have tea." She laughed. Then she placed an invitation on my desk. "What is this?" "Awards ceremony." I opened it. The Global Technology Council had nominated me for its Emerging Founder Award. I looked at the invitation. That's not really my thing. Mara smiled. "You spent your whole life hiding your name. Maybe I don't want to hide anymore." "Then go." I agreed. 3 weeks later, I stood on a stage in front of hundreds of people. My name was announced. I walked forward. The applause was overwhelming. But among the crowd, I noticed someone standing near the back. My father. He wasn't smiling. He was simply watching. For a moment, our eyes met. Then I received the award. The room rose in applause. And I realized something that would have been impossible for me to understand 2 years earlier. I'd spent years wanting my father to be proud of my name. Now thousands of strangers respected it. But the strangest part was that I didn't need his pride anymore. After the ceremony, I expected my father to leave. Instead, he waited outside. He stood beside a black car, hands folded behind his back. When I approached, he looked older than I remembered. "You did well." I smiled faintly. "Thank you." He hesitated. I watched the entire ceremony. I know. I was proud. Those 2 words hit me harder than I expected. For a second, the old version of me appeared. The boy standing beside his father's desk. The teenager bringing home certificates. The young man waiting for praise after saving a project. All of them wanted to hear those words. I was proud. But the man standing there now understood something the boy didn't. Sometimes the words you spend your whole life waiting for arrive after you no longer need them. My father continued. "I should have told you before." "Yes. I thought Adrian was more suited to the company." "I know. I thought you were too quiet." I almost smiled. I was. He looked at me. "Are you happy?" That question surprised me. I considered it. "Yes." He nodded slowly. "Is there anything I can do?" I shook my head. "No." His face tightened. "Nothing. Nothing that can change the past." He looked away. "I deserve that." I didn't answer. Then he said, "Your mother wants to see you." I hesitated. "I'll think about it." He nodded. As he walked away, I realized that forgiveness wasn't an event. It was a process, and I wasn't ready to forgive everything. But I was finally ready to stop carrying it. Over the next year, Meridian Grid grew faster than we expected. We expanded into Europe. Our platform became standard infrastructure for dozens of mid-sized manufacturers. I hired people who had been underestimated in their previous jobs. I deliberately created a culture where junior employees could challenge senior executives without fear. Mara asked me why. I told her the truth. I know what happens when people are afraid to speak. She understood. Then someone else entered my life. Her name was Elena. She joined Meridian Grid as an operations strategist. The first time we met, she disagreed with me. Completely. We were reviewing an expansion plan when she closed my presentation. This won't work. The room went silent. I looked at her. Why? Because you're optimizing for growth instead of stability. Nobody spoke. I asked, show me. She did. She was right. I changed the plan. Afterward, she apologized. I didn't mean to challenge you publicly. Good. She looked confused. I smiled. I need people who challenge me. That was the beginning. There was no dramatic romance. No instant attraction. Just conversations. Coffee. Late-night strategy meetings. Walks after work. She never cared about my family name. In fact, when she eventually learned who my father was, she shrugged. So, I laughed. That's it. Why should I care? Most people do. I'm not most people. She never treated me like a damaged man who needed to be rescued. She simply treated me like someone building a life. That mattered more than I could explain. Months later, she asked me something while we were sitting outside a small cafe. Do you ever wish your family had been different? Yes. Do you wish you had never left? I thought about it. No. She nodded. Then maybe leaving wasn't losing them. What was it? Finding yourself. I smiled. You've been waiting to say that, haven't you? Absolutely. I laughed. For the first time, the memories of my family no longer controlled the present. Then the past returned again. A major bank announced it was restructuring Veilcrest's debt. The company was shrinking. Adrian had resigned from his executive position. My father had stepped down as chairman. Clara had moved abroad. My mother was living quietly. The family empire that had once seemed enormous was becoming smaller every year. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt distance. One evening, my father sent me a letter. Not an email. A handwritten letter. He wrote that he had finally understood something. He had spent his life building a company because he was afraid of losing what his own father had given him. He had mistaken control for love. He had mistaken obedience for loyalty. And when I challenged that system simply by becoming independent, he had treated my independence as betrayal. At the end, he wrote, I don't expect you to come back. I only hope that one day, when you think of us, the first thing you remember won't be how badly we failed you. I folded the letter. I didn't throw it away. I didn't answer immediately. A week later, I visited my childhood home. The house was quieter than I remembered. My mother opened the door. For a moment, she simply stared at me. Then she hugged me. I let her. She cried against my shoulder. I missed you. I missed you too. That was the truth. Leaving had not erased love. It had simply taught me that love did not require surrendering myself. She led me inside. My old room was still there. The wooden bridge was gone. I had taken it years earlier. My mother smiled through tears. Your father kept asking where you had put it. I looked at her. Why? She shrugged. He said it was the only thing you ever made that he truly understood. I smiled sadly. For the first time, I could remember my father without only remembering the man who had hurt me. He had been both. A flawed father, and the person who had once held my hand while teaching me how to build. I wasn't ready to restore the past. But perhaps I didn't need to. Perhaps some relationships didn't need to return to what they were. Perhaps they only needed to become something honest. And when I left that house that evening, I realized my family was finally beginning to understand the difference between losing a son and losing control over him. 6 months after I visited my childhood home, my father called me again. This time, he didn't ask for a contract. He didn't mention Veilcrest. He didn't ask for money. He simply said, Can you have dinner with me? I almost said no. Then I remembered something Elena had told me. Closure doesn't always come from the other person, she had said. Sometimes you just need to see who they became after everything ended. So I agreed. We met at a quiet restaurant far from the business district. My father arrived early. He looked smaller without the title. No assistants. No executives. No people waiting for his approval. Just an older man sitting alone at a table. You're late, he said. I looked at my watch. By 3 minutes. He smiled. You haven't changed completely. Neither have you. We both laughed. The conversation was awkward at first. He asked about Meridian Grid. I told him it was growing. He asked about Elena. I told him we were together. He smiled. She seems good for you. She is. Then silence. Eventually, he said, I used to think success was about making sure nobody could take anything from you. I listened. I spent 40 years building Veilcrest because my father left me nothing except debt and a name. He looked down. I swore my children would never struggle. I said quietly, and you made sure we could never fail. He nodded. I did. That isn't the same thing. I know now. He looked at me. Adrian is rebuilding his life. I heard. He's working for another company. Good. My father smiled faintly. He hates that you're not angry with him. I laughed. That sounds like Adrian. He asked me once why you never tried to destroy him. I looked at my father. What did you tell him? That you had already moved on. The answer stayed with me. I had. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough. Then my father surprised me. I want to give you something. He placed a small envelope on the table. Inside was a photograph. It showed me and Adrian as children. We were standing in front of the old warehouse. I was holding a wooden model. Adrian had one arm around my shoulder. We were both smiling. I stared at the photograph. I don't remember this. You wouldn't. Why? Because that was the year you built the bridge. I looked at him. You kept this. Yes. For years, I had believed my father never noticed me. Maybe I had been wrong. Maybe he noticed everything and simply didn't understand how much recognition mattered. That didn't excuse what he had done, but it complicated the anger. I don't want the company, I said. I know. I don't want control. I know. I don't want an apology every time we meet. He smiled sadly. Then what do you want? I looked at the photograph. I want us to stop pretending the past didn't happen. He nodded. I can do that. We finished dinner without discussing business. When I stood to leave, my father said something quietly. I called you a failure. I turned. He swallowed. That was the cruelest thing I ever said to you. I said nothing. You weren't a failure. He looked directly at me. I failed you. For the first time, I felt the last piece of anger loosen. Not disappear. Just loosen. I nodded. Thank you for saying it. Then I left. Outside, Elena was waiting in the car. She rolled down the window. Well, I got inside. How was it? Strange. Bad. No. She smiled. Good. I looked at the photograph in my hand. Honest. She reached for my hand. I held hers. For the next few months, life became unexpectedly peaceful. Meridian Grid opened a research center. We started funding scholarships for students who wanted to study technology but couldn't afford expensive universities. I chose the first recipient myself. A 17-year-old boy from a small manufacturing town who had built a crude inventory system using discarded computer parts. His application reminded me of myself. Not because he was brilliant, because he was curious. I gave him the scholarship personally. You don't owe me anything, I told him. He looked confused. Then why are you helping me? Because someone helped me once. It wasn't entirely true. Nobody had given me the chance I wanted. But Mara had. She had asked me what I wanted to build. Sometimes one question could change a person's life. I wanted to give someone else that question. Meanwhile, Veilcrest continued shrinking. My father sold several divisions. Adrian started his own consulting firm. Clara returned home after several years abroad. The family name still carried weight, but it no longer carried fear. Then one morning, I received a call from my lawyer. There's a problem. What kind? Veilcrest's former investors are preparing a lawsuit. Against whom? Your father and several former executives. I frowned. What does that have to do with me? Some of the allegations involve technology developed during your father's tenure. I sat back. Are they trying to involve Meridian Grid? Not directly. Then, they claim Veilcrest concealed the extent of its dependence on your original technology. I understood immediately. The investors believed the company's value had been artificially inflated because the technology had been presented as internally owned and developed. My name was now central to the case. Not because I wanted it, because the truth had finally become too important to ignore. I refused to participate in any public attack against my father, but I agreed to provide documents. Facts. Nothing more. The hearing lasted weeks. My testimony was simple. I explained what I had built, what I had signed, Well, I've been told. What I had discovered later. The lawyers tried to make me emotional. I refused. One asked, "Do you believe your father intentionally deceived you?" I paused. I believe he made decisions that benefited the company and himself at my expense. Do you hate him? No. Do you forgive him? I looked at the judge. I don't think forgiveness changes facts. The courtroom went silent. That sentence appeared in the news the next morning. And suddenly my name became bigger than I ever expected. Not because of Meridian Grid, because people saw me as the son who had walked away without destroying his family, and still managed to build something greater. That was when the calls began. Investors, journalists, business leaders. People wanted interviews. They wanted my story. I refused most of them, because my life wasn't supposed to become a monument to my family's failure. It was supposed to become proof that leaving can sometimes be the beginning of becoming yourself. The biggest surprise came 3 months later. Meridian Grid received an offer to acquire a controlling stake from one of the world's largest technology groups. The amount was enough to make my board speechless. Mara asked me privately, "Are you selling?" I shook my head. No. Why? Because I don't want to build another company just to spend my life protecting it from someone else. She smiled. Then what do you want? I looked at the plans for our new headquarters. I want to build something that survives me. That became our new direction. Instead of selling, we established a long-term foundation. Employees received equity. Research grants were created. Small businesses gained subsidized access to our technology. The company became more than a profitable startup. It became the kind of institution I had once wished my family business could have been. A place where people didn't have to earn basic respect. A place where mistakes were treated as lessons instead of shame. A place where the quiet person in the room could still be heard. Elena became the head of our social impact division. One evening, we were walking through the unfinished headquarters. She looked around. "Do you ever think about the boy who built that wooden bridge?" "Sometimes. What would he think of this?" I smiled. "He'd probably think it was too big." She laughed. "Would you tell him what happens?" "No." "Why?" "Because I don't want him to think success was the point." She looked at me. "Then what was?" "Freedom." She squeezed my hand. That night, I received another message from Adrian. "Can we meet?" I stared at it. I hadn't seen him alone since the summit. I agreed, but met in a quiet park. He looked different. No expensive suit. No confidence. Just a tired man sitting on a bench. "You really don't hate me," he said. "No." "Why?" "Because I'm tired." He laughed bitterly. "I spent years thinking you were competing with me." I wasn't. I know that now. He looked at the ground. "Dad used to compare us." "I know." He told me I was the future. I nodded, and I believed him. "I know." Adrian's eyes filled with tears. "Do you know what I realized after you left?" I waited. "I wasn't better than you." He took a breath. "I was just louder." I looked away. That confession was more powerful than an apology, because it was the truth. "I don't want anything from you," I said. "I know, but if you want to rebuild your life, do it for yourself." He nodded. "I'm trying." We sat quietly for a while. Then he said, "Dad wants you at his birthday." I almost refused. "It's just family," he added. I smiled. "That's exactly why it's difficult." He laughed. "Fair." I eventually agreed. My father's birthday was held at the old family house. It was smaller than I remembered. The dining room seemed narrower, the ceiling lower. The place had once felt like an empire. Now it simply felt like home. My mother hugged me. Clara kissed my cheek. Adrian shook my hand. My father stood at the end of the table. He didn't make a speech. He simply looked at all 4 of his children. Then he raised his glass. "To family." I looked at the people around the table. Once, I would have thought family meant staying no matter what. Now I understood differently. Family could mean love without possession, forgiveness without surrender, distance without hatred. My father looked at me. To the son who taught me that a name isn't powerful because people fear it. He paused. It is powerful because the person carrying it gives it meaning. I lower my eyes. Everyone raised their glasses. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like an outsider at that table. But I also didn't feel like I had returned. That distinction mattered. After dinner, my father asked me to walk outside. We stood beneath the old tree near the garden. He said, "I know you won't come back. I looked at him. No. He nodded. I used to think that meant I lost you. I waited. Now I think it means I finally learned to let you be my son without needing you to be my successor. I smiled. That might be the best thing you've ever said to me. He laughed softly. I'm getting better. You are. We stood there quietly. Then I noticed something on the garden table. A wooden bridge. My father had rebuilt it. It wasn't the same one, but looked almost identical. I thought you took the original, he said. I did. I know. He smiled. I made another. I touched the wooden bridge. For a moment, I was 14 again. But this time, the memory didn't hurt. I finally understood that walking away hadn't erased my family. It had simply forced all of us to become people who could meet each other without pretending. And that was worth more than any inheritance. A year passed before my name became bigger than I had ever imagined. Meridian Grid was no longer called a startup. It had become one of the most influential logistics technology companies in the region. But the strangest part wasn't the money. It was hearing strangers talk about me. They called me disciplined, visionary, resilient, a self-made founder. Sometimes I wanted to tell them the truth. I hadn't been self-made. Mara had believed in me. Hundreds of employees had built Meridian Grid with me. Elena had stood beside me when I doubted myself. And even my family's rejection had forced me to discover a part of myself I had spent years ignoring. Success was never one person's work. It was simply easier for people to tell stories that way. One morning, my assistant entered my office. There were reporters downstairs. What? She handed me a tablet. I read the headline. Veilcrest founder retires completely. Son's company now partners with former family rival. I frowned. Former family rival? She shrugged. Journalists like drama. I closed the article. The partnership was true. After Veilcrest sold several divisions, one of the companies that acquired them became a major Meridian Grid client. The relationship had nothing to do with my family, but the media loved connecting the dots. I refused interviews. Then another article appeared. This one was worse. It claimed my father had secretly tried to use my name to attract investors years earlier. The claim was exaggerated, but it contained enough truth to create another wave of attention. My father called me. I didn't authorize that article. I know. People think I used you. You did. Silence. I know, he said quietly. That was becoming his most common sentence. I leaned back. Dad, you don't need to defend yourself to me. I want to. Why? Because for most of my life, I thought being a father meant protecting the family name. He paused. I understand now that sometimes protecting the family means admitting the name was wrong. I said nothing. Then he asked, would you speak at the company anniversary? I was surprised. What? Veilcrest is changing. Changing into what? Something smaller. He laughed quietly. Something healthier. I agreed to attend. Not because I wanted the spotlight, because I wanted to see what my father had built after finally releasing control. The anniversary event was held in the company's original warehouse, the same warehouse where I had built my wooden bridge as a child. The walls had been repainted. Most of the old machinery was gone, but one section had been preserved. My father stood beside me. You remember this? Yes. You used to spend hours here. I remember. He looked around. I used to think you were wasting time. I smiled. You thought I thought too much. I was wrong. We stood quietly. Then he said something unexpected. I'm proud of you. I looked at him. I know. He smiled. This time, those words didn't hurt. They felt ordinary. And that was beautiful. During the event, my father announced that Veilcrest would establish an independent innovation fund. It would provide resources to young engineers and entrepreneurs who didn't have family connections. He turned toward me. We're naming it after the first system my son ever designed. I stared at him. Dad. He raised a hand. You don't have to say anything. The room applauded. I didn't feel embarrassed. I didn't feel vindicated. I simply felt grateful. Not because my name had finally been acknowledged. Because my father had finally learned that recognition didn't diminish him. It made the truth easier to carry. After the event, Adrian approached me. I've got something to tell you. What? I got my first major client. I smiled. Congratulations. He looked almost embarrassed. It's a small company. Everyone starts somewhere. He laughed. You sound like Mara. She'll be offended. He shook his head. Then he became serious. I'm doing it differently. I know. No employees working 12-hour days just to impress me. Good. No taking credit for other people's work. Excellent. No pretending I know everything. I laughed. Now you're definitely improving. He smiled. Then he said, you know what the weirdest thing is? What? I don't want Veilcrest anymore. I studied him. What do you want? To build something that feels like mine. I nodded. That sounds familiar. He smiled. For the first time, I saw my brother not as the heir who had replaced me, but as a man trying to escape the role our father had created for him. That was the final piece of our relationship I hadn't expected. We didn't become close. Not immediately, but we became honest. Sometimes that was enough. Months later, Elena and I traveled to a small coastal town. No conferences, no investors, no board meetings, just two people walking along the water. She stopped near a quiet pier. I have a question. That's dangerous. She smiled. Do you still think about leaving? Sometimes. Would you do it again? I looked at the ocean. Yes. She nodded. Good. Why? Because I don't want to love a man who stayed somewhere he was unhappy just because he was afraid to leave. I looked at her. She took my hand. Then she said, I want you to choose me because you are free to choose me. That sentence stayed with me. Later that evening, I asked her to marry me. There was no crowd, no expensive event, no family announcement, just us beneath a fading sky. She said yes. When I eventually told my family, my mother cried. My sister screamed. Adrian laughed. My father simply said, then we should welcome her properly. For once, there was no argument, no competition, no hidden expectation, just happiness. But peace never arrives without one final test. 3 weeks before the wedding, my father called. His voice was unusually serious. There's something you need to know. What happened? Someone has been using your old name. I frowned. What do you mean? Someone has been approaching investors, claiming to represent Meridian Grid. I sat upright. Who? We don't know yet. Then he added, but they're using documents from the old Veilcrest archives. My stomach tightened. The past wasn't finished. Someone had taken the history we had finally buried and turned it into a weapon. And this time, I wasn't dealing with my family's mistakes. I was dealing with someone who had deliberately chosen to use my name. The investigation began immediately. Mara assembled our legal and security teams. Every old document was reviewed. Every former employee with archive access was interviewed. Nothing made sense. The person behind the scheme wasn't trying to steal Meridian Grid directly. They were using my history to create fake investment opportunities. My name, my old designs, even photographs from my childhood. Everything had been collected. Someone had been studying me for years. Then we found the connection. A former Veilcrest executive named Marcus Reed. He had left the company shortly after the legal investigation. He had access to old corporate archives. More importantly, he had been one of the people who originally convinced my father to transfer my technology under company ownership. Marcus had believed my departure would destroy my credibility. Instead, it had made me more valuable. He tried to use that value for himself. The police and regulators became involved. I provided every document. I gave one statement. Nothing dramatic. No threats. No personal revenge. Just facts. Marcus was eventually charged with fraud. Several investors recovered their money. The fake companies were shut down, and my name was cleared publicly. A reporter asked me afterward, "Do you feel vindicated?" I thought about it. No. Why not? Because I didn't win anything. But your reputation survived. I smiled. My reputation survived because the truth did. That answer spread across the internet. For weeks, people discussed my story. Some called me inspiring. Others called me lucky. Some accused me of pretending to be humble. I stopped reading. There was nothing left to prove. A week before my wedding, I returned to my old childhood home. My father was sitting in the garden. You came alone. Elena is with my mother. He nodded. We sat quietly. Then he handed me the wooden bridge he had rebuilt. I want you to take this. I looked at it. Why? Because I think it belongs with you. I accepted it. The bridge was small, simple, imperfect, but I understood why he had made it. It wasn't an apology. It was a symbol. The old bridge represented the boy who had believed his family would always be his home. The new bridge represented the man who had learned that home could be something he built himself. My father looked at me. Are you happy? Yes. Really? Yes. He smiled. Then I did one thing right. I shook my head. You did more than one. He looked surprised. I continued. You taught me to work hard. He laughed. That's generous. You taught me to build. I taught you to build companies. No. I looked at him. You taught me what happens when building becomes more important than the people inside it. He became quiet. Then I smiled. And I learned from that too. He nodded. That was the closest thing we had ever had a peace. The wedding was small. Mara attended. My team attended. My mother cried throughout the ceremony. Clara gave a speech that embarrassed both of us. Adrian danced badly. My father sat quietly beside my mother, smiling. When Elena walked toward me, I realized something. For years, I had believed the greatest moment of my life would be the day my family finally recognized me. It wasn't. It was this, standing beside someone who had never needed me to become powerful before she respected me. Someone who knew my failures and still chose me. Someone who didn't love my name. She loved the person carrying it. After the ceremony, my father approached me. He hugged me, not the formal kind, a real hug. You look happy, he whispered. I am. Good. Then he stepped back. I won't ask you to come home anymore. I smiled. Thank you. Because I finally understand. What? He looked toward Elena. Home is wherever you're allowed to be yourself. I nodded. That night, I placed a wooden bridge on the table beside our wedding photograph. Years earlier, I had left my family's house believing I had lost everything. I had been wrong. I had lost the version of myself that existed only for their approval. And in losing him, I found someone better. A man who could build without begging to be praised. A man who could forgive without surrendering his boundaries. A man who could remember his family without needing to return to the life they had created for him. My name had become powerful, but not because people feared it, not because it was attached to money, not because it appeared beside a successful company. It became powerful because finally it belonged to me. And when I looked at the woman beside me, at the life we had built, and at the wooden bridge resting quietly in our home, I understood the truth my younger self could never have known. Sometimes disappearing isn't running away. Sometimes it is the first step toward being found by yourself. 5 years after I left my family's house, I returned to the same warehouse where my father had once called me a failure. This time, thousands of people were waiting for me. The old Vailcrest warehouse had been transformed into a technology and entrepreneurship center. My father's innovation fund had grown beyond anything he originally imagined. Meridian Grid had become an international company, and I had been invited to open the center. The irony wasn't lost on me. The boy who had once stood in that building with a wooden bridge in his hands had eventually returned carrying something much larger. But I didn't come back to prove anything. I came back because the center was designed for young people who reminded me of myself. People with ideas but no connections. People who were intelligent but afraid to speak. People who had been told they weren't ready. The ceremony began quietly. Then my father walked onto the stage. He was older now. His hair had turned almost completely white. He no longer looked like the man who had dominated every room he entered. He looked peaceful. He stepped toward the microphone. For most of my life, he said, I believed a family legacy was something you inherited. The audience listened. I was wrong. He looked toward me. A legacy is something you earn through what you leave behind. He paused. And the person who taught me, that was my son. I lowered my eyes. My father continued. When he left, I thought he had failed. A murmur moved through the audience. I was wrong again. He smiled. He wasn't failing. He was refusing to spend his life becoming someone else. The applause came slowly at first, then louder. I walked onto the stage. My father stepped aside. I looked at the audience. I could have told them about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the humiliation, the years of rebuilding, the legal battles, the success. But I didn't want the story to be about revenge. So I told them the truth. There was a time when I thought success meant proving people wrong. I paused. I was wrong. The room became silent. Success isn't making the person who rejected you regret their decision. I looked toward my father. Success is reaching a point where their decision no longer determines your worth. My father nodded. I continued. Some of you will be underestimated. A few young faces looked up. Some of you will be rejected by people you love. I took a breath. And some of you will eventually have to walk away from places you thought you'd spend your entire life. I smiled. If that happens, don't spend the rest of your life trying to make those people regret losing you. The audience was completely still. Build something so meaningful that you stop caring whether they regret it. Applause erupted. I stepped away from the microphone. My father met me backstage. You become a better speaker. I had a good teacher. He laughed. No, you didn't. We both laughed. For a moment, everything felt simple. Then he handed me something. The original wooden bridge. Not the replacement. The one I had taken when I left. I stared at it. I thought you lost this. I kept it. Why? Because I thought one day you'd want it back. I held it carefully. It was scratched and faded, but it was still mine. I looked at my father. I don't need it to remember. I know. Then why give it to me? He smiled. Because some things don't have to be useful to be worth keeping. I hugged him. It wasn't forgiveness in a single moment. It was something better. Acceptance. The past would always be part of us, but it no longer controlled us. That evening, I returned home. Elena was waiting. She looked at the wooden bridge in my hands. You found it. No. I smiled. It found its way back. She laughed. We placed it beside the fireplace. Our daughter was sitting on the floor nearby, building something with wooden blocks. She looked up. Daddy, what's that? You set beside here. A bridge. Did you make it? A long time ago. Why? I looked at Elena, then back at my daughter. Because I wanted to connect two places. She picked up another block. Did it work? I smiled. Yes. In a way it had. Not the way I had imagined. The bridge hadn't connected me to the family I thought I needed. It had connected the person I had been to the person I became. That night, after my daughter fell asleep, Elena and I stood on the balcony. She rested her head against my shoulder. You look happy today. I was. Did you think about your father? Yes. Your old life? Yes. Do you miss it? I looked at the city. No. She smiled. That's good. I thought about that answer. Years ago, I would have felt guilty saying it. Now I didn't. I didn't miss being overlooked. I didn't miss being compared. I didn't miss begging for recognition. But I could miss certain people. I could remember certain moments. I could love my parents and still know that I belonged to my own life. That was the difference I had spent years learning. The following morning, I received a message from Adrian. Dad asked me to tell you something. I replied, what? His answer came a minute later. He wants you to know he's finally proud of you. I smiled. Then another message appeared. But he said that's not important anymore. I stared at the screen. Adrian continued. He said what's important is that you're proud of yourself. I put the phone down. For some reason, that message made me emotional. Not because my father had finally understood. Because he no longer needed me to need his approval. That was the real change. Not the company. Not the money. Not my reputation. Him. Me. All of us. We had finally stopped trying to own one another. Years later, people would sometimes ask me about my rise. They would ask how I went from being removed from my family's business to becoming the founder of an international company. They wanted a formula, a secret, a strategy. They expected me to say I worked harder than everyone else, or that I wanted revenge, or that I wanted to prove my father wrong. But the truth was much quieter. I simply reached a point where I couldn't keep living for someone else's approval. That was the beginning. Everything after that came slowly. One rejection, one project, one failure, one opportunity, one person who believed in me, then another, then another. My life wasn't transformed in one dramatic moment. It was rebuilt piece by piece, just like the bridge. Years after that first speech, Meridian Grid established a scholarship program in my father's name. Some people found it strange. They asked why I would honor someone who had once rejected me. My answer was simple. Because people are more complicated than their worst decisions. My father had hurt me. That would always be true. But he had also changed. And I had changed too. Forgiveness didn't mean pretending the betrayal never happened. It meant refusing to let that betrayal become the definition of my life. I never went back to work for my family. I never reclaimed a seat at Vailcrest. I never tried to become the heir. I didn't need to. I had built something else. Something that belonged to me. something my children could inherit without being forced to become me. And that mattered more than any title. One evening, years after everything ended, I stood in my office looking at the city. Elena walked in carrying 2 cups of tea. She handed me one. "You're thinking again?" "I always think." She smiled. "I know." I looked at the skyline. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't left?" She considered it. "Probably." And she shrugged. "Maybe you'd still be successful." I looked at her. "Really? Maybe." She smiled. "But you wouldn't be this version of yourself." I nodded. She was right. Sometimes the life you lose isn't the life you were meant to keep. Sometimes losing a place is what forces you to discover your direction. I looked at the photograph on my desk. It showed my family. My father, my mother, Adrian, Clara, me. We were standing together at the opening of the Innovation Center. Not perfect, not the family I once dreamed of, but real. I had forgiven them. Not because they deserved to erase what happened, because I deserved to stop carrying it. I closed the photograph. Then I looked at the wooden bridge beside it. The same bridge I had carried away when I disappeared. The same bridge my father had returned to me years later. The bridge had survived. So had I. But neither of us was the same anymore. My family once called me a failure because I disappeared. They thought leaving meant losing. They thought I would come crawling back. They thought my name would eventually disappear beneath theirs. They were wrong, but not in the way they expected. My name became more powerful than theirs not because I defeated them. It became powerful because I stopped needing theirs. I built a company. I built a family. I built friendships with people who knew me without knowing my history. I built a life where love wasn't conditional on achievement. And most importantly, I built a version of myself that no longer stood in front of a closed door asking to be let in. I have my own door now, my own home, my own future, my own name. And when I finally understood that, I realized the greatest victory had never been becoming more successful than my family. It was becoming someone who could look back at the people who once broke his heart and say, without anger, without bitterness, and without regret, "I don't hate you anymore." I paused. "I just don't belong to you anymore." Then I turned off the office light. I went home to the people who were waiting for me. And this time, I didn't disappear. I simply chose where I belonged.